This week on Painting Lines.
Yeah, it's like I'm bringing home gold for a country I don't even live in.
Exactly, or I've never even been to.
Yeah, yeah. Big time favorite. We're on his best surface and he can't pull it out.
Welcome to the Painting Lines podcast, your one stop shop for all things tennis. Join Erik and Aidan in their discussion for updates on news and pop culture. And from hot takes to betting, they've got you covered.
Ready?
Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we broke down an eventful week of tennis where we went through a kind of midweek update on the tournaments and the Olympics. And this week we're going to be recapping the men's tennis at the Paris Olympics. So, Erik, just starting us off with kind of a more fun topic, a little bit off the topic of tennis. What is your favorite event at the Olympics outside of tennis?
Yeah, that is a fun question. I would have to say the traditional sports such as track and field, and specifically the 100-meter race, because that's kind of the most hyped up. And this year, yesterday, was probably the best race I've ever seen in my life, with Noah Lyles taking the gold for the US by 5 thousandths of a second. I don't know if you caught the race, but it was so insane. And like that just gave me the chills. It was one of like the most dramatic race so far. And then you got swimming and other kind of like track and field events where there are photo finishes like that, but this one blows anything out of the water here.
Yeah, I mean, it was so close. I think that the announcer thought that Jamaica had won it, and
Yeah.
then like turned out that they hadn't.
He goes, and Jamaica takes gold.
Yeah, exactly. Feels bad for that guy. He's like, oh, I thought I had it.
Yeah, but Noah Lyles, I feel like he's a cocky guy, so if he didn't win, it would just kind of not look as good. But now that he did win, he's able to back up all of his talk, his attitude.
Yeah, but also with him, it's like he isn't necessarily the favorite in the 100 meter. Like
Right,
he's a
right.
200-meter kind of
Yeah,
specialist. So it's
yeah,
like if he wins the 100, it's like icing on the cake. If he loses the 200, it's kind of like, dude, what are you doing? Like he were like such a big favorite to win it.
yeah. Kind of like a tennis specialist, huh? On the
Yeah,
surface.
or a double specialist maybe. It'd be like if Ebden had won the gold in the singles too.
Oh, I don't think it was that. No, because I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah, no,
way
no.
different.
I'm yeah. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. But anyway, let's get right into the tennis here. So honestly, through the first two rounds of singles, there was nothing really that crazy. I think the most interesting thing was just the fact that Nadal was in it after not being really competing for a while there. I mean, it was interesting to see him in the tournament and get through that first round, but coming up against Djokovic was kind of like a buzz saw in that second round.
Yeah, I know. You kind of wanted that story, that fairy tale ending, like, oh, if he could beat Djokovic, maybe he can make a run. But I think people, like you said, were just happy to see him there. And I think it did mean a lot more that it was in Paris, where he's won so many times before,
Yeah,
which kind
100%.
of made his last French Open loss against Zverev kind of less dramatic, I think, because he was going to be back in a month at that
It's
same
true.
court. Or did they not know that he was going to play the Olympics? Because I thought it was for sure he was going to be playing.
I think people assumed he was going to be playing unless he got like re-injured.
Which, yeah,
Was possible.
couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely possible. But yeah, how about FAA beating Medvedev in the third round?
That was actually really impressive because FAA has been playing a lot better recently, particularly on clay. Like you look at his performances on clay this year, and he did pretty solid at the French Open where he made the round of 16. Great showing here, making the semis and playing in the bronze medal match, and also obviously playing in Madrid and making the final there. Fortunately, lost to Rublev in that match, but overall, like he has been playing great on clay. I wonder if that's something that he's been working on in his game, or what's been contributing to that.
Yeah, no, I think maybe, yeah, maybe his game is kind of starting to adapt the older he's getting. Maybe he's trying to play more strategic, if that makes sense, instead of just kind of going out there and whacking the ball. And we know that kind of that style of play with the longer points, ball's not moving as fast, that he's kind of adapting to that slower style of play. But the question I wanted to ask you here was Medvedev favorite to obviously he was favorite, but are you surprised that he lost? Because we have an FAA who is a great player but has been struggling, and then we have a great player Medvedev who's not that great on clay. Like
Well,
we always ask this question. I'm thinking like, is Medvedev on clay like Ruud on grass here?
Well, FAA then went on to beat a clay specialist in Root. So it's not like it was really, you're going to say, oh, Medvedev played poorly, because then another guy that's known to be very solid on clay also lost to the same opponent. So I think it was just
Hmm.
FAA playing like maybe above his pay grade, or maybe we should expect more of this type of performance from him. But I think that it was definitely more of an FAA solid performance rather than a Medvedev really being let down.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately, you don't get ranking points here, huh?
Yeah, that is kind of a bummer for FAA, because obviously
Hmm.
the ranking points would be real nice for him, given the fact that he's down a little bit lower than what he was a couple years ago. But still, I think just the confidence and all of that is a positive step for him, and he's going to bring that into the end of the year and hopefully be able to transition this sort of clay performance onto the hard courts at the end of the year.
Yeah, this is another selfless move, I think, too, because we talked about Dan Evans last week, and I think FAA, someone who has been struggling, who has lost so many ranking points, and then choosing to not opt out of the Olympics and play this tournament versus playing in, an ATP 500 and having kind of a weaker set of opponents than you would here, where you can probably make a run and get some more points, earn some more money, earn some more prize money. So I think kudos to him for playing for Canada, eh?
Yeah, it is a bummer that he got that that fourth place spot. I feel like that's literally the worst spot to get. You play the most matches and you don't really have anything to show for it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
But anyway, what about Fritz versus Musetti as well?
Dude, run it back. Musetti beating him again. I feel like Fritz should not be losing to Musetti, but maybe that's just how I feel. Maybe Musetti is a legitimate player now, and we can't kind of take him as he's playing Musetti. Like he's not an automatic win.
Yeah, I think to me it seems like, because Musetti and Fritz aren't actually separated that much in terms of their rankings. Fritz is a little bit higher, but it's like five or
Hmm.
six spots. To me, it kind of feels like Fritz is maybe the better player on hard courts, but then Musetti is a better player on grass and clay. And
Hmm.
that kind of makes sense with just the American versus European sort of style difference. Like Fritz has played so many matches on hard court, way less on grass and clay. Musetti's played a little bit more. And so I wonder if that also kind of lines up with the percentage of the year that's played on hard court versus played on uh, grass and clay. It's like if 40% is on grass and clay and 60% is on hard, then Fritz is going to have the chance to maybe get more points on a surface that he's better at.
Hmm. Yeah, and I wonder if we're gonna see a little rivalry brewing here too. If Fritz is kind of like very frustrated with Musetti just beating him over and over again, if we'll see that match on hard or on either on other surfaces too, that we can create more hype around it. It's like it's not just a Fritz versus Musetti match. It's like, oh, Musetti's beat Fritz the last couple times. Let's see if he can get one here.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you do have to make solid performances for a rivalry that like that to form, kind of,
Hmm.
because obviously if Musetti doesn't perform as well on hard courts, then you're not going to see him maybe in the later rounds where Fritz is going to be. But
Yeah.
I think we'll see how Musetti can transition into the this end of the season, because he's been playing very solid recently.
Can you go back to what you're saying about like the 60-40 on the surfaces? So how much is the season going to change? Isn't that just dependent on each player? Or what did you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that, like, if you look at their rankings, like it's pretty similar, right?
Hmm.
But what I'm saying is, like, if you looked at these two guys and you were like, okay, Fritz is better on hard court, which is 60% of the season, let's say, and
Oh,
then
okay.
Musetti's better
Waiting.
on grass and clay, which is 40% of the season, then Fritz maybe outperforms him for 60% of the year, but then
Hmm.
Musetti outperforms Fritz for 40% of the year. And so that's
Got it.
why it's like that slight difference.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Obviously, it's all just a theory, though. I'm not actually 100% sure on the numbers on that.
I know. Well, Musetti keeps winning, keeps it going here, beating
Yeah,
Zverev.
went on to beat Zverev exactly. And honestly, this was pretty shocking to me because I had Zverev as one of the favorites, but I think it was just a solid performance by Musetti and maybe a little bit of an underperformance by Zverev. But I overall think that not all the favorites are going to be
Hmm.
necessarily in the semis. So Zverev, a little bit of an underperformance, but not terrible.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what I mentioned earlier. I think Musetti is becoming more of a legitimate player. Like we do need to start taking him more seriously in draws. He's
100%.
beating Zverev, he's beating Fritz. This guy, he kind of popped off this year. He was always someone, he wasn't necessarily on my radar, but he was, yeah, like a top 20, top 30 consistent player. And now he's starting to show that he can beat the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was a little bit more like Morojan, where like I remember he beat Djokovic at I want to say like the Serbia Open
Mhm.
in 2023, and it was like it was a big deal, and it was kind of shocking, but it wasn't like, oh, this guy is actually the next guy that's going to be dominating. And actually, an interesting
Mhm.
thing though about Musetti was I saw this post on Instagram where someone showed all the predictions of what people were going to be getting the medals at the 2024 Olympics.
Mhm.
And someone actually predicted that both Alcaraz and Musetti were going to be getting medals, which I think is a pretty impressive guess for it being like 2021, or it was like right after the Tokyo Olympics that they made
Mhm.
that guess. And I was like, wow, that's pretty surprising that they were able to predict these two guys, which at that point were not really at the level they are now.
That is very impressive. I never would have thought Musetti.
Yeah.
Huh. But I think this is a bigger loss for Zverev than win for Musetti because Zverev had just made it to the Roland Garros final on this surface. We thought like, oh, big time favorite. We're on his best surface, and he can't pull it out.
Yeah. A little bit disappointing for him, but like I said, I think
Hmm.
not everybody can be as consistent as Alcaraz and Djokovic have been.
Yeah, yeah. Once again, there's the separation.
Yeah. And speaking of Alcaraz and Djokovic, I mean, they got pushed to breakers in this quarterfinal against Tommy Paul and Djokovic playing against Tsitsipas. So both playing against solid opponents, relatively competitive matches. Didn't go to three, but still they just advanced to the next round and didn't have to play that extra set.
Yeah, I think that's where the higher level comes into like being able to win in tiebreakers.
100%. I mean, we saw how important that would be later on in the tournament, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But then in the semis, to be honest, it kind of went exactly as I expected it to go. Because if you look at who was playing in them, it was Alcaraz and Djokovic, and then two guys that were kind of surprising. Like, I mean, obviously Musetti had just made the Wimbledon semifinals, so I guess we're like, okay, maybe we should have expected him here. But Musetti and FAA to be the guys in the semis, definitely not who I would have predicted coming into this tournament.
No, no shot, no shot. But yeah, I mean, Alcaraz and Djokovic. I kind of like this is the good mix, right? We have the two favorites, which I like, and then two kind of dark horses.
Yeah,
It
but
makes it fun. I will admit it was a little interesting.
yeah, it was interesting going into it, but then when the matches
Yeah,
actually started, it wasn't wasn't
yeah,
that close of matches. I mean, Alcaraz just clobbered FAA, and Djokovic won pretty handedly over Musetti.
yeah.
But then getting into the final, before actually I get into the final, I kind of do want to comment on the doubles because while we don't usually cover doubles, it's kind of weird because in the Olympics you had a lot of singles guys playing in the doubles tournaments. So first up, Alcaraz and Nadal, and then Murray and Evans made it through the first couple rounds, but ended up losing in the quarters. Sad goodbye for Murray, but I think I think it's a positive that he at least got a couple of wins out there.
Yeah, I know. Because at least he ended his career on somewhat of a high note and like very fun fashion. Like doubles, you have the support of someone else with you too. Like you get that camaraderie and kind of a little bit of a team aspect. Kind of how when Federer retired and he played with Nadal, like at least Murray got to share that moment with someone else and a fellow Brit too. I mean,
100%.
not much of a rival throughout his career, but at least it
Yeah.
was someone he had to have a good time with.
100%. Yeah. Sad moment to say goodbye to Murray, but at least he had that
What
positive
what's
moment.
yeah, what's in the future for Murray? What do you think?
Couldn't tell you. I think he'll take a step away from tennis for a little bit, and then we'll see him back in a couple years. Kind of like what we saw with Federer, where he
Mhm.
started kind of showing up again after a couple years away.
Yeah, hopefully we get a good doc out of Murray. Good
Yeah.
documentary like they did Federer.
Well, they made a doc when he got injured about him trying to come back, and it was kind of sad because it was like, oh, him attempting to make this comeback and just not being able to because the injury was too much. But
Yeah, well, this goes back to what Sam said. Like, we need some high Murray moments,
yeah,
not low, dark
yeah,
injury
one hundred
docs.
percent. But then another interesting thing, like I said, there's a lot of singles talent in the doubles draw, but then in the final, it was the doubles specialists. Like it was Rom and Krajinic and Ebden and Piers, who were both double specialist teams. Paul and Fritz actually did get the bronze, so that's a solid performance for them. But a cool thing about the doubles final was that Ebden ended up getting the gold with the Aussie team after getting clobbered in singles and kind of trashed on when he lost to Djokovic 0-1. And I think it's just kind of cool, like good redemption to see him win the gold and be like, yeah, this is why I was here. Like, if you guys were like, oh, what is this guy doing at the Olympics when he's getting beaten this bad? He's like, I'm here because
Mhm.
I'm going to win the gold in doubles.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about bringing home some hardware for your country, and he was able to do that. Doesn't matter his performance in singles. But
Exactly.
going back to like the double specialists and then the great singles players who are playing doubles, it's funny that Federer actually has a gold with Wawrinka when they played doubles together,
Yeah.
and they beat double specialists, the Bryan bros.
Yeah. I mean, it's Nadal also
So
has a golden doubles.
yeah. See, so I this showed me some new love for doubles, I must say. Like I was tuning into most of the doubles matches, whereas before in the tournaments I kind of overlooked them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of like it's like watching pickleball when you have like
Yeah.
the Jack Sock or the Sam Querrey in there. It's like you're trying to draw more eyes to it just because there's the bigger name guys in the tournament.
Yeah, plus it's every 4 years the Olympics, so
Yeah.
I'm willing to watch.
It's like watching cricket or something in the Olympics.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm watching it because of the Olympics, not really because it's because of the sport it is. But yeah, so then the final, pretty tense match. What'd you think about it?
Well, the final, they definitely put on a show, I must say. Kind of reminded me of the Cincinnati match, just as far as like being hard fought and, the fact of how close the scoreline was. I was a little shocked. I really thought Alcaraz was going to beat Djokovic and not only beat him, but beat him like he did in Wimbledon a few weeks ago, like pretty handedly.
Yeah, I think the difference between this match and Cincinnati was just the fact that it didn't feel as much back and forth as that match. Like that match had like these swings in momentum where one guy seemed to be favorite to win, and then the other guy seemed like he was going to be the favorite to win, and then went back and forth, and then went to three sets. In this match, it was very like tight throughout. But
Hmm.
honestly, it seemed to me like Alcaraz was feeling a little bit of nerves because he just wasn't playing to me like he had been at Wimbledon or at the French Open, where like he, if you watched his Medvedev match at Wimbledon, in that first set that he lost, he was a little bit wild, and that's why he lost the match or lost the set was because he was a little bit wild. He was missing a few shots more than he maybe should have, and so Medvedev took advantage of that and got the set. In this match, I think it was a similar thing. Djokovic was playing very tight and was not making that many errors, and Alcaraz was playing a little bit loose. I mean, Alcaraz was producing some great winners, but he also was missing maybe more than he should have. And you saw that in some of the longer rallies where he would just put a ball in the net, and you were like, that's not something that you see very often. I feel like usually you don't see guys put that many balls in the net.
Definitely. No, it felt a little sloppy too. But what do you think Djokovic did to prepare for this match? Do you think he went back and watched old film of when they played and had a certain strategy going in?
I feel like Djokovic just went out there and said, I'm not going to make any unforced errors. Like, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to force you to beat me. You're going to have to hit a bunch of winners. You're going to have to force me into a bunch of errors. I'm not going to give you a bunch of easy points that maybe other players might. And while he did have a couple things that didn't go his way, I mean, he hit it off the top of the net a couple times and that went out. And then he missed an overhead, which I think is kind of embarrassing. Like, Djokovic, you got to figure out your overheads, man. It's like the weakest point in your game.
Yeah.
But I think he just went out there and was like, I'm going to play super tight. And if Alcaraz can beat me, so be it. But I'm not going to give him any freebies.
Yeah. And then how about that just pure emotion coming out of Djokovic after the final? Because I was starting to think that he was losing steam as far as his competitive edge, but that just went completely out the window when I saw he just burst into tears after and like hit the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Gil Gross post something about Djokovic winning here, and he said this was his North Star for his season, which I think is very accurate. This was the one thing that Djokovic had in his mind coming into the year. I want to win the Olympics. And while up to this point in the year, kind of been a disappointment for Djokovic, like doesn't win the Australian Open for the first time in however long, doesn't win the French after he has to pull out, loses in the final at Wimbledon. All of these things are just kind of disappointment after disappointment. But then the one thing that he really, really focused on, he ends up getting done. And I think that's just the release of all that emotion. And it's like he had done this 4 times already and had never even played in a gold medal match. And this time he's able to go out there, not just make the gold medal match, but win it. And now, I mean, I made a short video about this on our Instagram, but he's kind of completed tennis. Like there's no big tournament that he hasn't won now. He's won all 9 Masters 1000 events. He's won the tour finals. He's won all 4 Grand Slams, and now he's won the gold medal. These are all the biggest tournaments in the world, and he's the only guy that's done all of these things.
Right. And what you were saying earlier, it's almost like whatever he didn't accomplish this year doesn't even matter because the one thing he was going out for that he needed to do, he did. So great to see. I was kind of mixed. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't necessarily root for him for this match, but I'm happy to see him get it.
Yeah.
I like Alcaraz, or I liked Alcaraz in this. It was just kind of a win-win, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I kind of wanted to see him win just because I felt
Mhm.
like with how big of how like impressive his career has been, I felt like he deserved to get that last little piece that he was missing.
Yeah, and now he's gonna take some time off, right? Definitely not playing Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, going back to Cincinnati too, I think another reason why it reminded me of the match was after the match when he won Cincinnati and just let out that roar of emotion, ripped his shirt, and then we saw that in the final too. Except he didn't rip his shirt, but that same expression.
100%. Well, alrighty though. You ready to hop into segments?
Yep, let's do it.
Alrighty. What's new in tennis? What'd you see this week?
All right, so I saw Shapovalov loses all of his prize money and his ranking points from DC for getting disqualified. And I'll give you a little background on what happened. So he made an error. He threw his racket on the ground. He got into a heated exchange with a fan, and he actually said, "I've worked hard all my life. Fuck you." And we all know you're not allowed to curse at the fans. And so he ended up getting a code violation for this. And the supervisor came out. They talked to the umpire, brief conversation. Then after that, ultimately disqualified him from the match, and he was supposed to earn $53,240 and 100 ranking points for reaching the quarterfinal here. And what's big is he's currently ranked at 139 because he's been injured and he's kind of slowly coming back. So there's 100 points would have put him at 106, which would have given him a little more of like less of a buffer for qualifying for Grand Slams. And the question here just becomes like, is this a fair rule and should it be changed? I don't know. I mean, obviously, some people came to Shapovalov's defense, one of them being Bublik, who's been disqualified in matches. He said this rule needs to change. This is BS. And then the one of the co-founders for the Players Association, the union that all the players are part of, also said this rule needs to change. So I'm wondering, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough penalty for one action, but I think it's also like the point is to discourage players from doing that. It's like getting fined, right?
Hmm.
It's like, hey, if you're going to get disqualified from a match, you can default your entire performance. I don't think it's necessarily fair. I mean, I think honestly, what I would do would be you make it like they didn't even play in the match. Like
Yeah.
maybe you go, okay, you reached the quarterfinals and you
Hmm.
lost. We're going to take away the bonus you got from reaching the quarterfinals and playing in that match. We're going to make it act like you lost in the last round. So he gets the points for making the round of 16 and the money for that, but he doesn't get any of the money or points he would get for uh, making it to the quarterfinals. I think that would be a more fair thing because it would be like,
Hmm.
it wouldn't be completely taking everything away, but it would still be penalizing a guy for kind of ruining the match. Or I mean, ruining
Yeah.
the experience for a fan. I mean, obviously the fan probably said something that was not
Uh-huh.
great, but they're supposed to ignore it.
I know it just sucks because they're held to a much higher standard than the fans. Once again, there's no repercussion for the fans. Like, what's a fan going to get fined? But I don't know. I think what you said was a pretty reasonable solution. So hopefully we don't need to keep seeing this in the future. And remember, this is Medvedev had also said "fuck you" to an umpire and didn't get this. So there's where the discrepancy comes in. I think there needs to be consistency and precedent, but sucks for Chapo. I feel like being disqualified, like you essentially played the tournament for free. Like
Yeah.
that's your work. You were working. You're essentially an employee. You went to do your job, and now you're not getting paid for it because of one little slip up. And you still gave the fans a hell of a match.
Yeah, but I think with the Medvedev thing, which I feel like is just a different situation. It'd be like if Alcaraz had said "f you" in the Olympic final. It's like he wouldn't have gotten defaulted in the first set of that match because it's the Olympic final. All eyes are on it, right?
Hmm.
No, not that many people were watching uh, Shapovalov's match in DC. Like, obviously, people were there and some people were watching it on TV, but not even close to the same level as something like the Wimbledon semifinal, which Medvedev was
Hmm.
playing in. And just the size of that match, like I've said before, I think
Yeah.
just gives him kind of the freedom to do something like that.
Yeah. So there's got it's like weighted on different tournaments,
Yeah,
but
you got to be aware of the situation you're in. Like if you're playing in a challenger tournament, you're going to be defaulted immediately.
yeah. Yeah. All right. What about you? What did you see this week?
So I saw that Corda won in DC. So obviously, that's a pretty cool thing for him. It's his biggest title. He's won one title in the past, but obviously not an ATP 500. But the cool thing about it is actually his dad won the title 32 years ago. And it's kind of cool seeing like these father son combos winning titles. Like we obviously saw it earlier in the year when Shelton won in Houston and his dad had won there previously. So I think that's just cool to see. And Court is now up to career high rank number 18. So he's kind of taking advantage. He's one of those guys that's taking advantage of that lack of points for the Olympics and the like top level guys not being there. Like obviously he probably would have had to play like Fritz or Tommy Paul or someone like that if they weren't at the Olympics. And instead he gets a little bit of a relief from having to play those guys and takes advantage of it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it for a couple reasons. Like you said, the family history, that's super freaking cool. And then also the fact that he's closing in on kind of the main American pack. Because talent-wise, he is up there as like one of the top Americans, but he kind of is left out of the discussion just because of injury. And there was kind of a gap in them. So you had Tiafo, Paul, and Fritz, and then Corda. So now he's getting closer, and I like it because I like Corda. So happy to see him get the title. So his second one. That's great.
Yeah, it was kind of. I feel like last year it was like Tiafo, Fritz, and Paul, and then it kind of rotated to Fritz, Paul, and Shelton. And
Mm.
now it's like Fritz, Paul Shelton, and Korda closing up while Tiafo kind of slips in the wrong direction.
Yeah, Shelton. I didn't even mention Shelton. That's another great American that I feel like
Yeah,
we got the bodies. We just
yeah,
need someone to break out.
yeah, four in the top 20 now.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. All right. How about bet of the week?
Yeah, so I went with Raonic plus 135 over Runa. Uh, really just going with the Canadian in Canada. I think uh, I think the crowd's going to be on his side, and I think that's actually going to play a role in this match. I think Runa will get in his own head, and obviously we know he's not the most stable guy, firing his coach again, and just I think that's going to play a factor. I think obviously he's coming back off of an injury, so maybe he's not fully healthy. I think Roundish gets it done, and I think he's a good pick here, given the fact that he's the underdog.
Yeah, that's not a bad bet, huh? The
Yeah,
Canadian in Canada. I like it.
exactly.
I like
What
it.
about you? Who are you going for?
I hope you brought your keys because I'm going for a lock this week. I'm taking Tiafo minus 165 over Tabilo.
That's a
So
lock.
that's a lock. I'm going with a
Whew.
lock because it's a pure momentum play. Tiafo just made a semifinal run in DC, had that big win against Rublev, and Tabilo is kind of a clay rat, and he hasn't played on hard since before the clay slash grass season. So I think I'm gonna go with someone who is the better player and has hard court experience. I just played in a hard court tournament over the clay Chilean.
Whew. I mean, I feel like that is not a lock. I would not have picked that as a lock in this match. I don't know if I would have taken it generally as a risky bet because to me, I think Tabilo's had an excellent year. I get that he's mainly played on clay, but still, it's like you look at how well he's played this year, and even if it has been on clay, you have to assume that kind of is going to transition over to him playing better than he has in the past on hard court. And Tiafo, I mean, he had a decent run in DC, beating Rube.
Decent.
I mean,
It's a good
beating.
run. It's a semifinal
Yeah,
run.
it's a semifinal. Okay, it's a good run. I agree. You're right. But beating Rublev doesn't seem like that big of a deal right now, right? I mean, Rublev has been playing terrible recently. And I feel like while he had a good run, you're right, in DC, it's like that's one good performance. Is that really going to be make this a lock? I feel like it maybe an overestimation of how well Tiafo has been playing.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm going with it.
Yeah. I think yeah, I mean, I can see it definitely going that way. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
shocked if I was wrong, but
I was gonna
I
say, I mean, I
calling
feel pretty confident, so
yeah,
I have no rebuttal.
yeah. For me, it's just the
I said what
lock
I'd say.
aspect. But
Uh-huh.
yeah. Anyway, how about match of the week? What'd you go for here?
This is gonna be pretty funny. I am going with Tiafo taking down the one seed Rublev in DC.
Oh,
Dude, I love this match. There's quite a few reasons why, actually. I think this was a big confidence booster for Tiafo because he hasn't really had the best year. Rublev hasn't had the best year either, but I feel like he was the one seed going in, and it's kind of like I think I got my swagger back, like that type of win for Tiafo. And also the play itself, like his ability to turn defense into offense was incredible. Like you're watching someone like Rublev who's not afraid to try to hit through you. Tiafoe wasn't having any of it, and he was like playing great defense. He was coming to the net. He had that good mix of the variability of coming to the net and hitting from the baseline. And then another reason, this is actually the most exciting one of the match, but it had that comeback element. So Tiafo won the first set and then was down 1-4 in the second set, forced it to a tiebreaker, and ended up winning the match 6-4, 7-6. So it was great to see him like hold strong in that second set too. And that's obviously not a great sign for Rublev that he couldn't finish out that set up 4-1. But anyway, the last reason was this is actually pretty funny. The celebration that Tiafo had at the end. It was one of those. like subtle flexes where you have your arms at the side and it's not like a big over the head. It's like something you would see from a defensive end after getting a sack or a wide receiver like mossing a DB, because it's like an assert your dominance on your opponent type of celebration. Like that's just why I love Tiafoe. He's bringing excitement and physicality into tennis because you don't see tennis players celebrate like that, you know?
Yeah, I feel like that's a classic Tiafo sort of celebration.
He's
He's
like the
definitely celebrated with a flex or with a kind of football style celebration in the
yes,
past. So
yes. It's that where you like kind of perk up your traps and then flex them up a little bit.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
What about you? What was your match of the week?
I'm going with the Olympic final. I mean, Djokovic winning 7-6, 7-6. Like I said, neither guy could get a break. Not that they didn't have chances. Obviously, there were a few games in there where Djokovic had chances to break, and there was that one big game where Alcaraz had like 5 break points and couldn't get it done. But overall, just very solid rallies. And I think just the fact of how high the stakes were in this match, like to Djokovic, it was bigger maybe than the Wimbledon final was for him. And
Mhm.
I think that showed in this match. I think, like I said, Alcaraz, I think, was nervous here, but I think Djokovic played real smart, didn't give away any free points, and in the end, Djokovic got it done. And I think the match was tense throughout, just with how close it was.
Yeah, I feel like this had to be your match of the week too, with the amount of investment you put into watching it.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the listeners what happened?
Oh, well, I mean, I think everybody that watched the final knows that it kind of got delayed a little bit. It was scheduled for one time, which in the Pacific Standard Time was 3 a.m. So I woke up at 3 a.m. to watch it, and then it was pushed back an hour, and then it was pushed back another hour, and so I had to wake up a few separate times to watch this match. But I'm glad I did in the end. So
Yeah, great match, great match. Very surprising, I think. But hey, he did it. The Joker did it. Good
100%.
for him. Good for him. That was such a scene seeing him like with his family after too.
Yeah, I mean, just
And
yeah, the pure emotion.
yeah, me and my buddies were talking about this too. Like it's huge for Serbia because that's probably the only like medal they're gonna win this Olympics.
Yeah, I'm sure they got something else. I'm sure they got like
You think? I don't know,
dressage or
man.
something. I don't know.
But also, like, 'cause one of my buddies did bring up the fact that Djokovic like doesn't even live in Serbia anymore, and like we don't know how often he goes back, and like how he left pretty early. Like, does he still has a connection there, but it's also kind of like he's not living in Serbia. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean,
He lives
like
in Monaco. Like he's
for
evading tax. He's not paying taxes in Serbia.
it's like for you, Eric, like you moved from Florida and now you're living in New York. It's like, do you still have an association with Florida, even though you left really at like 18? It's like, yeah, you probably do, right?
No, definitely. I'm not saying he doesn't have an association, but it's kind of like yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like Osaka playing for Japan despite never even living in Japan. I guess it's a little different. It's a lot different than that because
Yeah,
he was
I
born
feel
in
like that's way
Serbia.
more extreme.
That's a, yeah, no, I just don't like when people do that. But
Yeah, it is
um,
weird with the Olympics how that works out. It's like, oh, this
right,
person's like, oh, my uncle's grandfather was from San Marino, so that's who I'm going to play
yeah,
for in the Olympics.
yeah. I mean, it does make sense if you like, for example, in America, it's so hard to qualify. But if you're, you know, grandfather's uncle's like roommate was Irish, you can go over and qualify for the Ireland team, which is probably a lot easier if like you were, top in America but not the best of the best. It's like at least you
Yeah.
get to compete in an Olympics.
No, I mean it makes sense for the athlete. I don't know if it makes sense
Hmm.
for the
Yeah, it's
uh,
like I'm bringing home gold for a country I don't even live in.
exactly, or I've never even been to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.